What if we told you that everything you thought you knew about time is nothing but a huge lie? What if the calendar, as we know it, is merely an illusion designed to separate us from our spiritual selves and the true rhythm of the universe? Well, then we would have arrived at the core of an amazing theory that is currently circulating on the internet. According to this theory, humans and the cosmos once lived in perfect harmony, in which the cycles of the moon, the sun, and the stars determined our entire existence. But over the centuries, the true nature of time has been distorted by the religious and political powers that be, in order to manipulate us all. But fortunately, there is a book that can tear down the veil that has been cast over time and lead us straight back to the enlightening truth. Well, at least that's what the alternative camp believes. But what knowledge does the King James Bible of 1775 really hide? Could it be that we have all been collectively deceived for centuries, or are we better off not getting too lost in wild speculation? There are some things that are so banal that any further discussion of them is superfluous. Because let's be honest, who would seriously doubt the fact that a year is 12 months? Well, as so often, the answer in this case is the internet. So, one or two attentive users may have realized by now that we can confidently throw our calendars in the trash. After all, the concept of time was deliberately unhinged some time ago in order to rob us of our spiritual roots and make us collectively docile. So far, so wacky. And yet, at this point, we should perhaps not make it quite so easy for ourselves and dismiss the theory of the time lie out of hand as nonsense. Instead, let's look at the arguments put forward by the proponents of this unorthodox idea and what the opposing side has to say in response. And as mentioned at the beginning, the King James Bible from 1775 is considered the most important source of knowledge. But what is it actually about? How does this edition of the Holy Scripture differ from others? And what groundbreaking truth does it contain? Well, according to this version of the Bible, the first month of the year was originally not January, but March. Furthermore, the week did not begin on Monday, but on Sunday. But what is perhaps most surprising is the fact that a year consists not of 12, but of 13 months. Quite astonishing, isn't it? Well, that depends primarily on who you ask. While the recreational Bible researchers of this world sometimes euphorically hold the corresponding timetable from the King James Bible in front of the camera, the conservative camp points out that it is simply the Jewish calendar. And as a lunar calendar, it can also include 13 lunar months. In fact, this is the case in leap years, which last 384 days and serve as an adjustment to the solar year. And the fact that Jewish weekdays begin with Sunday is also no well-kept secret, but knowledge that has been openly available to humanity for thousands of years. Who has changed the time? As we can see, the 13-month year can be debunked quite quickly. However, as is well known, the Jewish calendar is not the most common system of years used worldwide. That honor goes to the Gregorian calendar. Enacted in 1532 by Pope Gregory XIII, who gave it its name, the calendar reformed the Julian calendar in order to bring the calendar year into line with the solar year. The Julian calendar had been introduced by Julius Caesar in 45 BC. Although the calendar year started at different times depending on the region, the Roman calendar traditionally began on March 1st. In ancient Rome, this was always the day on which the sacred fire was lit in the Temple of Vesta, Rome's central sanctuary. But after the Roman consuls, yes, that really is the plural of consul, moved their inauguration to January 1st, this date eventually became the new beginning of the year. And yet the original March start can still be seen on the Gregorian calendar. After all, the names of the months from September to December mean nothing other than 7th to 10th month. From a purely technical point of view, the Gregorian calendar is only delayed by just under 27 seconds compared to the solar year. These only add up to a whole day over the course of more than 3,230 years in the Julian calendar. However, this was already the case after 128 years. And so it happens that we are now 13 days ahead of the Julian calendar. So far, so plausible. But what if the calendar change was not based on practicality after all? Rather, as the alternative camp suspects, the desire to plunge our spiritual nature into chaos. Well, it is a fact that the Jewish calendar is not the only one to have 13 months. Other ancient peoples, such as the Egyptians or the Babylonians, also occasionally used such a system of years. And while the months of the lunar calendar always began with a new moon and lasted around 29.5 days each, the result was a year that counted around 354 days. As mentioned, the lunar calendar was extended from time to time by a 13th month to align with the solar year. But in truth, this was not just a practical adjustment, but an expression of the deep connection with the cosmos. The different phases of the moon were seen as a symbol of the eternal cycle of life. Just like life, the moon was also subject to a constant change of birth, growth, decay, and rebirth. Furthermore, each moon phase is said to have its own unique energies that influence people in their natural and spiritual being in different ways. The calendar as the key to human nature? In this context, the introduction of the Julian calendar was not just a new counting system, but a profound incursion into the human understanding and experience of time. After all, the new calendar, with its 12 months and an average of 365.25 days, was henceforth oriented to the sun. And where harmony with the lunar cycles now belonged to the past, the way was clear to make the calendar an everyday tool. Consequently, the Romans forced the understanding of time into an unnatural corset that served control and organization. A lunar calendar with a varying number of months and thus practically always in motion seemed simply too unpredictable for the Roman rulers to be able to steer the fate of the empire collectively and reliably. In this way, the political and social order was also established in terms of the calendar. But at the same time, this step also cut man's connection to nature, which had shown him the way for thousands of years. And with the disappearance of the lunar calendar, so the alternative view. The worldview also underwent a fundamental change. While life and time were previously understood as an eternally repeating cycle based on the phases of the moon, time now appeared to be something linear. Consequently, the cyclical character of time was also lost, and time was only understood as a sequence of events that moved in one direction, from the past into the future. Intuitive spiritual principles and natural rhythms had to give way to rigid structures imposed by political and religious elites. But how did this distortion of the understanding of time influence and change people's lives? Now, in our modern society, the calendar is not much more than a practical tool for counting days and months, but it wasn't always that way. In fact, cosmic cycles played a major role in people's lives even before the word calendar was invented. Many ancient cultures linked their lives directly to the cycles of nature. They observed the movements of the moon and stars in order to integrate the knowledge gained from them into their daily lives. In this context, the calendars based on this knowledge were by no means just a way of counting down the days. They were a key to reality. For example, the new moon was seen as a fresh start, while the blazing full moon was like a roaring climax that was celebrated in style. The slender crescent of the waning moon, on the other hand, prompted people to reflect, let go, and prepare for the new cycle. The other thousands and thousands of formations in the firmament also had a direct influence on human life. However, as is well known, the celestial constellations in different regions of the world are not always the same. And while our distant ancestors still had calendars that were aligned with the individual cosmic dynamics of their homeland, most of the world today uses the same system. The festivals, rituals, and ceremonies that were once precisely aligned with the different phases of the moon were increasingly relegated to the background with the introduction of the Julian solar calendar, and with it, humanity's connection to the natural rhythm of the cosmos. Or to put it more drastically, the skeptical camp is convinced that our calendar was deliberately designed to be wrong or unnatural in order to distance us further and further from a sacred calendar. And let's just assume for a moment that this really is the case. How could we possibly return to cosmic harmony in this context? Should we simply throw the Gregorian calendar overboard and turn to regional, cultural calendars instead? Malicious tongues would claim that we can't even manage to get rid of the annual time change. And indeed, as things stand, it is, to put it mildly, unlikely that we will bid farewell to our current calendar system in the foreseeable future. And yet, there is still some hope, because if time really is a cycle, then maybe one day we will once again enter a phase in which we will rediscover our spiritual selves. But before that happens, there is a phase in which you will hopefully find your way back to our channel on your own. Press your thumb and click the subscribe button now to never miss a new video from us again. See you soon.